Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic, we are going to talk about something that a lot of you guys have been asking me about, and that's to do a 5 things that you need to know about fishing tidal water to make you a better fisherman. So today that's what we're going to get into, but before I do, I want to point out September's winner from our subscriber prize package that we always do. This month we're giving away a case of Bridgeford beef jerky. And this month's winner, or I should say last month's winner, September's winner, is a Steve Pelletier. Steve Pelletier, please reach out to me. Either go to Instagram, Facebook, send me a direct message, or go to my website, mattsteffenfishing.com, hit the contact me link, and send me an email with your contact information so that I can provide that to Bridgeford, and they will send that jerky directly to you. It'll be some of the freshest jerky you've had, I can guarantee it. It's a phenomenal product, and I really think you'll enjoy it. Guys, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please hit that subscriber button. It'll get you entered into my monthly prize drawings for sponsor products, and you could be a winner like Steve was for this past month. All right, so today's topic, 5 things that you need to know about fishing tidal water to make you a better fisherman. So the first and foremost thing that you need to know about fishing tidal water, and it's the most important thing, is that there are 2 tides. You have a high tide and a low tide. Those tides, guys, are dictated by the moon. I don't even know exactly how it works, but I'm not going to get into that. You just need to know that you've got a high tide and a low tide, and those tides are roughly 6 hours apart, which means throughout the course of a day, you're going to have 2 high tides and 2 low tides. That will fluctuate. It's not exactly 6 hours, but that's roughly what it is. So that's the number one thing that you need to realize, is that that water is always either coming in or it's going out. You do have slack water periods when you're at the very peak of each tide, but for the most part, you've always got moving current, right? So it's just like fishing a river. But it doesn't set up the same as a river, because on tides, the fish are moving around all the time. On a river, you've got a consistent current coming from one direction, and those fish will set up in a specific spot because they know it's not going to change. You may have a slight decrease or an increase of current, but in general, it's going to be pretty much the same. On a tidal water, that tide is coming in and going out, and it's raging based on what period of the tide it's in. So a fish, because of that, they know that they can take advantage of peak feeding times on those tides. So just because you have a tide that's going out or coming in doesn't necessarily mean that those fish are going to feed all the time. In my experience, I have not been anywhere else in the country where I see fish be so dependent on the tide cycle in terms of when they're going to feed. You know, the fish know when the easiest time is for them to feed. So you want to be aware, and I have a mosquito chasing me, you want to be aware of those feeding windows. Generally, the best times are right when you switch from one tide to the other. So if you're at low tide and you're just switching over where the water's, you get the last hour of low tide, so the water's at its lowest point, and the same thing with the high tide. Once you get high tide, right when you're at the peak periods, those are generally the best times. So you just want to be aware that, that you may be in a good area, but it's the wrong timing, and the fish aren't just going to bite. So the first thing is you just have to be somewhat familiar with the tides. Before heading out, pull up, you can Google it, you can pull it up on electronics, you can find the tide cycle pretty easily. So you want to be aware of that, not just from a fishing standpoint, but also from a boating standpoint. If you get way back into an area and the tide, was at high tide and you're back there fishing around and low tide comes in, you may not be coming out of there anytime soon. You may have to wait for a full cycle before you can actually get enough water to float your way out. So you want to be aware of what those tides are. So where should you begin looking for fish? In my opinion, the easiest place to find fish on tidal water are anywhere you've got pinch points or creeks. So if you've got a big marsh, And out of that marsh, you've got like drains that come out, because when that water is on a falling tide, all that water is coming out of that marsh, gets into that creek channel or the drain channel and comes out with it. Well, all those fish are, that were back up, say, in that marsh, and all the bait fish are getting sucked down right to that little bit of a deeper channel. So those are really high percentage spots. And that works. It's not just a low tide thing. That works on most tides. They utilize those creek channels as highways. So to me, those are really, really good places to look. That's pretty much the first place I'll go if I'm on a tidal waters, trying to find pinch points where I've got water coming in and out, but it's allowing those fish to set up and feed on bait that's being brought in either direction, right? So you got to be aware that, it could be a spot that's good on both an incoming tide and an outgoing tide, or it could be a spot that's just good on incoming because it sets up different, or just on outgoing. So you want to be aware of that. The next thing is, anytime you're fishing on tidal water, you have to pay really specific attention to when you got those bites. And when I say when, I mean specific times. If you got a bite 2 hours into a falling tide, you should make note of it. Chances are good that you'll be able to replicate that bite on the same tide at the same time during that tide. For whatever reason, it seems like you can almost do clockwork on these. If you've got a spot that's good the first hour of an incoming, it's probably good on all first hours of the incoming. If you've got a spot where you caught 3 fish and you're, in a 4th hour of a falling, then you need to know that, because next time you go out, if you've got, you can compare your notes to the tide cycle that you're on, and you're probably going to be able to replicate it. And the important part to that is, over time, the more experience you have and the more bites that you've kept data on, you'll just have that many more high percentage spots to hit at the right time for those tides. So that's something that you definitely want to be aware of. The fourth thing, though, it's the same. It goes along with keeping track to where you're getting bit. But just because you fish through an area and you didn't get a bite does not mean it's a bad area. You really want to try to work through areas that look right on multiple different tides, because there are so many times where those fish are they have lockjaw and they don't want to eat until the certain tide is right. So you could fish through an area that's got tons and tons of fish and not generate them to bite because you missed the right feeding period. So if you see something that looks good and you didn't get bit, switch it up. Come back at the opposite tide. Give it another try. So don't write it right off the books completely. I can't tell you how often you see people fishing the right area, but it falls apart on them because they didn't hit it at the right time. So don't write it off just right away because you didn't get a bite. It's really important to realize that, that there's a very, very big timing perspective to all of this. So, not only keep track of your times, keep track of where you got bit and what part of the tide you were on. And just because you didn't get bit in an area doesn't mean it's not good. But at the same time, you want to recall, or you want to make sure that this is a high tide spot or this is a low tide spot, because there's just so many times that you're around the right fish, but they only bite during those certain tides. It's like that's when they feed. The last thing that you want to keep record of is the wind direction. Tidal waters can be dramatically affected by the wind. So if you're planning on an outgoing tide to be your best bite, but you've got a wind that's blowing against that outgoing tide, it's probably going to throw off that bite. So if you can prepare for that ahead of time, that'll make you a better fisherman. You can start looking for areas that aren't going to be as affected by the wind, and you'll have the tide that you want. Or you may, instead of planning on that outgoing tide, you may say, you know what, I'm going to have to fish the high tide stuff. So you can just plan for it ahead of time. But I can't tell you the number of times I've seen the wind completely throw off fishing because it was affecting the tide. And the anglers that are ready for that and know how to adjust to that are the ones that are in a much better position to do well than just trying to force the way you wanted to fish. So that's my 5 things that you need to know about tidal water. tidal water is such a unique fishery because you've just got consistently moving water in different directions, and those fish take advantage of that more than any other fish I know of, you know, in any other situations, and therefore timing is really, really important. So I hope this was helpful, guys. If it was, hit that like button, share it on social media, stay tuned. We got new videos coming out every day.